If we open that petition, you could lose the throne. Rowan's warning carried across the quiet roadside clearing, stopping Alara before she could fasten the guardian seal beneath her cloak. They had left Blackstone less than an hour earlier, traveling north toward the settlement where Mara Caldwell had last been traced. The morning was cold enough to silver the grass beside the road, and the dark outline of the northern hills stretched across the horizon. Cale stood beside his horse, one hand resting on the saddle. He did not look surprised. That unsettled Alara more than anger would have. "Explain," he said. Rowan unfolded the message an archive courier had delivered at the last Blackstone checkpoint. Adrian moved closer while Alara watched Rowan's expression. The petition referenced in the Northern Succession Review was never formally resolved. Now that the Guardian office has been restored, there is once again an independent authority capable of requesting that review. Alara touched the small silver seal beneath her cloak. Yesterday, it had represented the right to ask questions no one could silence. She had not imagined the first question might reach Cale's throne. "How does that threaten him?" she asked. Rowan chose his words carefully. Cale inherited authority through the succession chain confirmed by that 19-year-old ruling. If the original petition contained evidence that should have been considered before the ruling became final, reopening the review could allow the legitimacy of that chain to be challenged. Adrian frowned. "Could, not would." "Correct," Rowan said. "We have not seen the petition. We do not know what evidence it contained, whether that evidence was valid, or whether it changes anything." Alara looked at Cale. "Then there is no reason to assume your throne is in danger." "There is reason to understand that it might be," Rowan replied. "That is why I am telling him now." Cale finally took the message from Rowan and read it himself. No one spoke. Alara remembered the council chamber, the silver crown she had refused, and Cale telling the court to hear her answer instead of asking him to provide one for her. Now the choice had turned toward him. Is there a lawful way to leave the ruling closed? Cale asked. Alara's attention sharpened. Rowan nodded. Possibly. An unresolved historical petition is not automatically sufficient to reopen succession. Until the evidence is authenticated, the crown could keep the material sealed, and my throne remains untouched. Unless stronger evidence emerges elsewhere, yes. The northern wind moved through the trees. Alara felt the weight of what Rowan was saying. Cale could protect Blackstone from uncertainty without destroying a record or speaking a lie. He could simply refuse to open a door that the law did not yet require him to open. "Cale," she said quietly, "we do not even know what Mara has." He looked toward the road ahead. "No, she may have nothing that changes the ruling." "That is possible. Then we should not decide what this means before we hear her." Cale folded the message once and returned it to Rowan. "Agreed." Rowan studied him. "There is something else you should understand. If Mara's evidence is authentic and the Guardian formally petitions for review, your interests and Alara's office may no longer align." Alara went still. Cale looked at the Guardian seal beneath her cloak, then met her eyes. For the first time since accepting the office, she understood the cost of its independence. It had been easy to admire a duty that could challenge power when power remained abstract. It felt different when power had Cale's face. "If that happens," Alara said, "we deal with it then." Cale stepped toward his horse. "No," she looked at him. His voice remained calm. "If the evidence is real, we do not deal with what protects me. We deal with what is true." Rowan held his gaze. "Even if those become different things." Cale mounted and turned his horse toward the northern road. "That," he said, "is what we are going to find out." The northern settlement appeared shortly after noon, tucked between pine-covered hills nearly 30 miles beyond Blackstone's last permanent watch station. There were no stone gates, banners, or royal markings. Only weathered houses gathered along a narrow road, and a small meeting hall beside a frozen creek. Alara understood immediately why someone who wanted to disappear might choose this place. Their arrival still drew attention. People paused beside porches and shop windows as Cale and the others dismounted, but no one approached until an older woman stepped from the meeting hall. "Mara Caldwell?" Rowan asked. The woman looked at him, then at Adrian, before her gaze settled on Alara. "You should leave." Alara had imagined this moment too many times to be surprised by the coldness in Mara's voice. "We came because of the records from 19 years ago. Then you traveled a long way for something that should have stayed buried." Cale remained several feet behind Alara. He had deliberately removed the royal clasp from his traveling coat before entering the settlement, but Mara recognized him anyway. Her expression hardened. "And you brought the king." "He came because the truth may concern him," Alara said. Mara gave a humorless breath. "Kings always want the truth until the truth belongs to them." Alara felt Kale's attention shift, but he did not defend himself. "Then do not speak to him," she said. "Speak to me." Mara studied her. "You still need his authority to ask questions that powerful people do not want answered." "Not anymore." Alara reached beneath her cloak and removed the small silver guardian seal. She placed it carefully on the wooden railing between them. Mara stopped breathing for a heartbeat, her eyes fixed on the open circle crossed by a single vertical line. "Where did you get that?" "Blackstone restored the guardian office yesterday." Mara looked toward Kale. "He restored it?" "The council recognized my petition under the original covenant provisions." Alara kept her voice steady. "I accepted the duty." Something in Mara's face changed. Not trust. Not yet. But the certainty with which she had dismissed them began to fracture. She stepped closer to the railing without touching the seal. "Do you understand what that office was created to do? Review disputed historical claims. Request protected evidence. Challenge records when the surviving account is incomplete. And remain independent of the crown." "Yes." Mara looked at Kale again. "Does your king understand what she may uncover?" Kale answered from where he stood. "Enough to know I should not decide what she is allowed to find." Mara watched him for several seconds. "That sounds noble on a quiet road. Then judge me when the road ends." Alara glanced at him. The answer carried no anger, only an acceptance that words were not evidence. Mara seemed to hear the same thing. She picked up the guardian seal, turned it once in her palm, then returned it to Alara. "I thought I would never see this mark used lawfully again." Rowan stepped forward. "We found reference to an unresolved petition connected to the Northern Succession Review." Mara's face closed instantly. "You should not have." "But we did," Alara said. "And the transfer record leads here. The review house has been empty for years." The petition was not always empty paper. Mara looked toward the houses behind them, as though checking who might be listening. "Come inside." The meeting hall was plain, warmed by a small iron stove. Mara locked the door, then faced Alara across a wooden table. "Before I tell you anything, understand this. Dr. Hart did not hide records because he wanted power. Neither did I." Alara sat opposite her. "Then why?" Mara's eyes softened for the first time. "Because by the time we understood what the records could do, there was no guardian left to hear them." Rowan placed the archive transfer notation on the table. Mara recognized it immediately. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the paper. "You kept something," Alara said. Mara did not deny it. "For 19 years. Something about my family?" Mara looked directly at her. "Yes, but that is not why they needed your history to disappear." Alara felt the room narrow around those words. "Then why?" Mara glanced once toward Kale before returning her eyes to Alara. "Your father was not the reason they buried your records." Mara did not answer immediately. She crossed to the small iron stove, though the room was already warm, and adjusted the handle as if the simple movement could give her another moment to choose her words. Alara waited. 19 years of missing history had taught her that forcing an answer rarely made it more truthful. Finally, Mara turned. "Your father mattered," she said. "Your family mattered. But the danger was never simply who you were related to." Alara kept her eyes on her. "Then what was it? What your family could verify?" Rowan leaned forward. Mara continued. "The Northern Succession Review began after conflicting records appeared concerning one branch of Blackstone's succession history. Most of the evidence supported the ruling that eventually became official, but one set of records did not." Kale remained near the far end of the table. "What did those records say?" "I do not know enough to answer that honestly." Mara's response came without hesitation. "I was a verification officer, not a succession judge. My responsibility was to confirm whether documents were authentic, not decide what they meant." Adrian nodded slightly. "Then what did you verify?" "That a petition existed, that supporting records accompanied it, and that the petition met the requirements for independent covenant review." Rowan placed both hands on the table. But no review occurred. There was no one left with recognized authority to conduct it. Alara felt the guardian seal beneath her cloak. Because the office had gone dormant. Mara looked at her. "Not all at once. That is the part people misunderstand. There was no single morning when someone announced that the guardian would disappear. Authority was questioned. Appointments were delayed. Witness records became harder to authenticate. Certain family connections vanished from searchable archives. By the time the petition needed an independent hearing, the system could say there was no qualified reviewer available. Alara understood before Mara finished. My history was part of that. Yes. They erased my identity because I might someday inherit the right to challenge the ruling? Not exactly. Mara moved closer. Blood alone would never have made you guardian. You learned that already. Then why erase me? Because a surviving, verifiable witness line made it possible for the office to return. The words landed with quiet force. Alara had spent years believing her missing history meant someone feared who she was. The truth was colder. Someone may have feared what the system could become if people like her remained visible. So I was not the secret, she said. Mara's expression softened. You were one of the doors they needed closed. Kale lowered his gaze for a moment. Alara looked toward him, but he said nothing. This discovery did not belong to his throne yet. It belonged to 19 years of silence. Rowan broke it carefully. You said most evidence supported the official succession ruling. Does the surviving petition prove that ruling was wrong? No, Mara's answer was immediate. Do not make that mistake. A petition is a request for review, not proof of its conclusion. Alara appreciated her precision. Then what does it prove? If authenticated, it proves there was evidence the final ruling should have examined before the matter was considered settled. Kale stepped closer to the table, and the ruling that followed became part of the succession chain through which I eventually inherited Blackstone. Mara met his eyes. Yes. No accusation followed. None was necessary. Rowan asked, where is the petition now? Mara looked toward the shuttered window. The original disappeared after the Northern Covenant Review House closed. Adrian frowned. Then we came north for a record that no longer exists? I did not say that. Mara crossed to a narrow cabinet against the wall and removed an old wooden document case. She set it on the table but kept one hand over the lid. Dr. Hart knew the original might not survive. Before the transfer, he required a certified verification copy to be made under the rules that existed at the time. Alara stared at the case. You kept it. I kept what I was authorized to protect. Mara looked at the guardian seal beneath Alara's cloak. For 19 years, there was no lawful office I trusted enough to receive it. Slowly, she moved her hand away from the lid. Now there is. Mara opened the wooden case, but did not remove the document immediately. Inside lay a narrow folder wrapped in faded gray cloth, its edges worn from years of careful storage. Rowan moved closer, but Mara raised one hand. Before anyone touches this, we follow the old verification procedure. Adrian nodded. Chain of custody first. Mara recorded the date, location, and names of everyone present, then placed the guardian seal beside the case. Only after Alara signed as receiving authority did Mara unfold the cloth. The document beneath it looked almost ordinary. No royal crest announced a hidden claim. No dramatic declaration accused Blackstone of placing the wrong ruler on the throne. It was a certified verification copy bearing reference numbers, witness codes, and a transfer notation matching the entry Rowan had found beneath the council chamber. Rowan examined the markings without touching the page. The reference number matches. Adrian checked the verification code against his notes. So does Caldwell's credential. Mara nodded. Dr. Hart required 2 verification paths. Mine confirmed the transfer. His confirmed that the supporting material met the threshold for covenant review. Alara looked at the document. Does it tell us what the petition claimed? Only in summary, Rowan said. He read carefully. It challenged whether the Northern succession ruling should become final before a disputed branch of evidence received independent examination. Kale's expression remained controlled. Does it identify that evidence? Not here. Then we still do not know whether the challenge had merit. Correct. Rowan looked toward Mara. But if Blackstone confirms these references, this establishes that a lawful petition qualified for review and never received one. Mara nodded. Alara watched Kale. Nothing on the table accused him. The decisions had been made 19 years ago, long before he could have influenced them. You did not do this, she said quietly. No, his gaze remained on the page. But I inherited what came after it. Alara understood the distinction. He was not accepting guilt for another generation. He was recognizing that the unanswered question had survived into his own. Rowan spoke carefully. This document does not invalidate your ring. I know. And until authentication is complete, the Crown has lawful grounds to keep it sealed. Cale finally looked at him. Meaning we could wait. Yes. Stability matters when evidence is incomplete. A review should not begin from assumption. Mara closed the empty case. That was how it began before. The room turned toward her. Not with anyone declaring that truth should disappear. With reasonable delays. Another verification. Another missing authority. Another promise that the timing would be better later. Her eyes moved to Alara. Eventually, later became 19 years. No one answered. The warning did not make caution dishonest. It simply revealed what caution could become when no one decided where it ended. Rowan placed a protective sheet over the copy. We can verify the remaining references at Blackstone. Until then, we announce no conclusion. Agreed, Cale said. Alara looked at the Guardian seal beside the document. Yesterday, the office had mint access to records and the right to ask questions without royal permission. Now that independence had become painfully specific. If Blackstone confirms the copy, she asked, what happens next? Rowan answered without returning to the history they had already established. The unresolved petition becomes eligible for formal review. Who can request it? A brief silence followed. The Guardian. Alara felt Cale's attention move toward her. She kept her eyes on Rowan. And if I request it? The historical succession ruling enters examination. That does not remove Cale from the throne, and it does not presume the old ruling was wrong. It means the question finally receives the hearing it qualified for. Alara understood. Her first major decision as Guardian would not determine whether Cale deserved his throne. It would determine whether a question buried for 19 years deserved to be heard. She looked at Cale then. He gave her no command, no reassurance, no silent request to protect him. That made the responsibility feel heavier. Mara gathered the transfer papers and pushed them toward Alara. This is why Dr. Hart protected the copy. Alara placed her hand over the documents. Because he knew the ruling might be wrong? No, Mara said. Because he believed no ruling should be protected from a question merely because the question was inconvenient. Outside, the wind moved through the northern pines. Alara looked down at the Guardian seal. The office had given her the authority she once wished someone else had possessed. Now she understood the price of it. The first door she might have to open led directly toward the man she loved. Alara waited until they stepped outside before speaking again. Rowan and Adrian remained inside with Mara to complete the transfer record, leaving her and Cale near the horses beneath the pale afternoon sky. For several moments, Cale simply watched the northern hills. Alara understood the silence differently now. He was not avoiding the question. He was allowing it to become real. If Blackstone authenticates the copy, she said, I may have to request the review. Cale turned toward her. If the evidence meets the standard. Yes. Then follow the standard. Alara almost smiled at how simple he made it sound. You know that is not the difficult part. I know. She folded her hands against the cold. Yesterday, I wanted this office because I was tired of needing someone else's permission to search my own history. I thought independence meant no one could close the door in front of me again. And now I know independence also means I cannot close it for someone I love. Cale held her gaze. You should not. The answer hurt precisely because she had expected it. If the petition reaches the threshold for review, I could become the person who formally places your succession under examination. You would become the person who gives an unanswered petition the hearing it was promised. The court will not hear the difference. Then the court will have to learn it. Alara looked away. Blackstone depends on stability. The Pax depend on you. Even a review that proves nothing could create uncertainty. Yes. And if the old ruling was wrong? Cale was quiet for a moment. Then refusing to know would not make it right. Alara turned back to him. Do not ask me to choose between you and the truth. His expression softened. I am asking you not to. She went still. Cale stepped closer, stopping before the distance between them disappeared completely. If you act as guardian, do not change your judgment because I am your husband. Do not protect me from evidence you would follow if another man sat on that throne. And if following it costs you everything, then the cost belongs to me, not to you. Alara searched his face. You make that sound easy. It is not. For the first time since Mara opened the case, something beneath his calm became visible. I am afraid of what we may find. The admission surprised her. Cale had faced every uncertainty since her arrival at Blackstone with a steadiness that sometimes seemed impossible. Hearing him admit fear did not make him smaller. It made his choice matter more. So am I, she said. Cale nodded. Nothing needed to be repaired between them. The truth had not divided them yet. It had simply removed the comfort of pretending love could answer every question. There is something I need from you, Alara said. What? If this becomes difficult, do not hide the cost from me because you think that will make my duty easier. Cale considered her words. You want honesty even when honesty makes the choice harder. Especially then. A faint smile touched his face. That sounds like something a guardian would say. It sounds like something your wife is saying. The meeting hall door opened. Rowan emerged carrying the protected document case, Adrian beside him. Mara remained at the threshold. The transfer paperwork is complete, Rowan said. Nothing we examined contradicts the copy's stated origin. Blackstone's archive will determine the rest. Cale reached for his horse's reins. Then we return. Mara looked directly at him. And when your counsel gives you a lawful reason to wait. Cale paused. I will hear it. That was not my question. Alara recognized the challenge in Mara's voice. Cale did too. He looked toward the document case, then at Alara. I do not know what I will choose until I know exactly what the choice is. Mara studied him. Fair answer. Cale mounted, then looked down the road toward Blackstone. But whatever waits there, I will not ask the Guardian to protect the king from a question the Guardian is sworn to hear. They reached Blackstone before sunset, and Alara knew the council had already heard enough to be concerned. Every seat in the great chamber was occupied. There were no ceremonial banners, no silver crown, and no formal welcome. Rowan carried Mara's protected document case to the central table, while Adrian went directly to the archive clerks with the transfer references. Cale remained standing before the council rather than taking the throne. Alara stopped at the position reserved for the Guardian, several feet from him. Aldrin spoke first. We received notice that material connected to the Northern Succession Review has been recovered. A certified verification copy, Rowan said. It establishes the existence and transfer of a petition. It does not establish that the petition's claims were correct. A senior councilman leaned forward. Then no responsible conclusion can be drawn until Blackstone confirms the references. Agreed. The answer seemed to ease the room. And until then, the councilman continued. The Crown has no obligation to begin a formal succession review. Rowan glanced at Cale. That is also correct. Alara listened carefully. No one was hiding anything. No one was demanding that Mara's document disappear. The argument before them was more difficult because it sounded responsible. A councilwoman spoke next. The Pax will not distinguish between examining an old ruling and declaring the current king illegitimate. If word spreads before the evidence is complete, uncertainty will become the story before facts have a chance to become one. Cale nodded. What do you recommend? Aldrin answered. A sealed historical inquiry. The Guardian and Rowan continue examining every surviving record. The petition remains protected. If additional evidence justifies formal review, the council considers it then. And the current succession? Cale asked. Remains outside formal challenge while the inquiry continues. Alara looked toward Rowan. Is that lawful? Yes. Before anyone could continue, the archive doors opened. Adrian returned carrying a narrow ledger and placed it beside Mara's copy. Blackstone confirms the transfer number. Caldwell's credential appears in the verification register. And Dr. Hart's secondary reference matches the protected archive entry from the same year. Rowan checked the lines himself. Then the copy is authentic as a record of the petition's transfer. Yes, Adrian said. But we still do not possess the complete supporting evidence. The senior councilman turned toward Alara. Guardian, does authentication of this copy prove the old succession ruling was wrong? No. Does it prove the current throne belongs to someone else? No. Then caution is not concealment. Alara held his gaze. Not by itself. Aldrin looked between them. No one is proposing permanent suppression. We are proposing time. Alara understood the appeal immediately. More time could produce better evidence, and better evidence could protect everyone from a judgment made too soon. Her duty was not to distrust caution. It was to decide whether caution was still serving the search for truth. Cale finally spoke. If I authorize the sealed inquiry, Can the Guardian continue requesting records without royal approval? Yes, Rowan said. Can the petition be destroyed, altered, or removed from protected custody? No. And can a formal review still be opened later? Yes. Cale looked toward the council. Then your proposal has legitimate merit. Several members relaxed. He did not. Which is why I will not decide tonight. The senior councilman frowned. Your Majesty, I want both lawful paths placed before me tomorrow morning. One order authorizing the sealed historical inquiry. One order opening the royal succession review. Rowan nodded. I will prepare them. State the consequences of each without recommendation. Cale's gaze moved across the chamber. No arguments about what preserves my position. No warnings designed to frighten me into protecting it. Aldrin inclined his head. Understood. Alara watched Cale turn toward the throne behind him. He did not touch it. If the safest choice and the right choice are the same, he said, the law will show us that. Then he looked back at Rowan. If they are not, I want to know before I sign my name. Alara found Cale alone in the council chamber after midnight. The fires had burned low, leaving the long table beneath the soft light of 2 lamps. Rowan had finished the documents less than an hour earlier. Both waited in front of Cale now. The first authorized a sealed historical inquiry while preserving the current succession from formal challenge. The second opened the royal succession review immediately. Neither carried his signature. Alara stopped across the table from him. You asked for the consequences without recommendations. Cale looked up, and Rowan gave me exactly that. Then before tomorrow, I need to give you something else. His attention sharpened. Alara placed the Guardian seal on the table. My answer. Cale said nothing. The copy proves a lawful petition qualified for independent review and never received one. It does not prove the ruling was wrong. It does not prove your throne belongs to anyone else. I know. But if you ask what I would do as Guardian, I would open the review. Cale held her gaze. Why? Because the question already met the standard for a hearing 19 years ago. The failure of the old system prevented that hearing. I do not believe my duty is to make the same question qualify twice. Something in Cale's expression softened. Then that is your answer. As Guardian. Yes. Alara looked at the 2 documents. As your wife, I have another one. Cale waited. I will not ask the man I love to gamble his throne to prove he loves me. The room seemed quieter after she said it. If you choose the sealed inquiry, I will understand. You would not be destroying evidence. You would not be ending the investigation. You would be choosing caution while we search for more. Cale looked at the first order. And you would forgive me. Alara frowned slightly. There would be nothing to forgive. That is what makes this harder. Why? Cale rested his hand beside the unsigned page. Because if you demanded that I open the review, I could tell myself I was doing it for you. If you threatened to leave, I could call it sacrifice. If you condemned me for waiting, I could spend the rest of my life arguing that I chose Blackstone over your approval. Alara understood before he finished. But I am not asking you. No, so. Whatever you choose belongs to you. Exactly. She lowered her eyes. Yesterday, Cale had refused to tell her whether to accept the Guardian office because he wanted her answer to belong to her. Now she was giving him the same freedom, and she understood how heavy freedom could feel when no one else could carry the consequence. I wish I could make this easier, she admitted. I do not. She looked up, surprised. Cale continued. Easy choices reveal very little. You could lose more than most people ever have to risk. That does not make the question less deserving of an answer. Alara crossed her arms against the chill in the chamber. Are you afraid? Cale did not hide behind silence this time. Yes. The answer was immediate. Not only of losing the throne. I am afraid of what uncertainty could do to Blackstone. I am afraid people will turn an investigation into a verdict before we have facts. And I am afraid we may discover that something I trusted was built on a question no one wanted answered. Alara stepped closer to the table. Then whatever happens tomorrow, do not pretend those fears do not exist. I will not. Cale looked again at the orders. There is one thing I cannot stop thinking about. What? The sealed inquiry is reasonable. That is why it is dangerous. Alara remained silent. A dishonest choice would be easier to reject. This one gives me good reasons to wait. Stability, caution, incomplete evidence. His fingers moved away from the page. And good reasons can become comfortable enough that no one notices when a temporary choice stops being temporary. Alara understood then why Mara had feared reasonable delays more than obvious lies. You know what I would choose, she said. Yes. But tomorrow, I will not choose for you. Kale met her eyes. I know. Alara picked up the guardian seal and walked toward the doors. Before leaving, she looked back once. Kale remained between two lawful orders, one preserving the certainty Blackstone already possessed, and the other opening a question no one could promise would end safely. By morning, the council would see his signature. Whatever appeared on that page would not belong to Alara, Mara, or the past. It would belong to him. The great court was full before the morning bell finished ringing. Alara entered through the eastern doors wearing the guardian seal openly for the first time. Kale was already standing before the throne, not seated upon it. Rowan waited at the central table with Mara's authenticated verification copy and the two orders prepared the night before. One would keep the petition under temporary seal. The other would begin a formal royal succession review. Kale had signed neither. Aldrin rose when Alara reached her place. Not beside Kale this time. As guardian, she stood at the independent position reserved by the Old Covenant, several feet from the royal table. The distance was small enough to cross in seconds, yet everyone understood what it meant. Today she was not there to protect her husband. She was there to protect the integrity of the question. Rowan addressed the court. Blackstone's surviving registers confirmed the transfer number, Mara Caldwell's verification credential, and Dr. Hart's secondary reference. The recovered copy is authentic as evidence that a lawful petition qualified for independent review 19 years ago and did not receive that review. A councilwoman spoke carefully, but the petition does not establish that the succession ruling was incorrect. Correct, Rowan said. No such conclusion has been reached. The senior councilman turned toward Kale. Then the Crown still has lawful grounds to authorize the sealed inquiry. Evidence can continue to be gathered without creating a public succession dispute before the facts justify one. Kale looked at Alara. Guardian. Every eye followed his. Alara kept her voice steady. The evidence does not justify declaring the old ruling wrong. It does justify giving the petition the review it qualified to receive, even knowing where that review may lead. Especially because we do not know. Kale nodded once. No reassurance. No request for mercy. He turned back to Rowan. Read the consequences. Rowan lifted the first order. Temporary sealing preserves the current succession without formal challenge while historical investigation continues. The Crown remains under no immediate review. Then he lifted the second. Opening the petition creates a formal royal succession review. Your Majesty remains reigning alpha while that process is pending, but the historical basis of the succession may be examined. If material evidence changes the legal understanding of that succession, further proceedings could follow. The senior councilman spoke. Your Majesty, no one here is asking you to bury the truth. We are asking you not to confuse an unanswered question with an established fact. Kale regarded him. I agree. A trace of relief moved through the chamber. Then Kale stepped toward the table. Rowan placed both orders before him. The sealing order lay on the left. It was lawful, cautious, and defensible. Kale picked it up. Alara felt her heartbeat change, but she did not move. She had promised herself she would not make this choice for him, even with a look. Kale read the page from beginning to end. Then he set it down. For 19 years, he said, this petition remained unanswered because the authority required to hear it was absent. That authority exists again. The senior councilman stood. And the Crown has every right to wait until more evidence is found. Yes, Kale said. That is why this is a choice. Silence settled over the court. Kale moved the sealing order aside. Opened the record. No one spoke. Aldrin was the first to find his voice. Your Majesty, once formal review begins, the Crown itself may be questioned. Kale looked toward the throne behind him, then back at the council. Then let it be questioned. The senior councilman stepped forward. You could be placing your own reign at risk over a petition that may ultimately change nothing. Then the review will establish that. And if it changes everything? Kale's gaze moved briefly to Alara. She saw no certainty there about what tomorrow would bring. Only certainty about what he would do today. He turned back to the court. If truth can take this throne from me, then silence never gave me the right to keep it. Alara felt the words move through the chamber before anyone reacted. Kale took the second order, signed his name, and placed it before Rowan. Open the royal succession review. Rowan accepted the document. Then, for the first time that morning, Cale looked directly at Alara not as king to guardian, but as husband to wife. She did not cross the distance between them. She simply held his gaze. Yesterday, he had told the court to hear her choice. Today, she understood that the greatest proof of his strength was not that he possessed a throne. It was that when truth finally reached it, he did not ask truth to kneel. The royal succession review began before noon, and Alara immediately noticed the empty space beside Cale. Under ordinary proceedings, she would have stood there. Today, the old covenant placed the guardian at a separate table facing the royal position. Barely 20 feet divided them, yet the distance carried the weight of the duty she had accepted. Cale remained Alpha King while the review was pending. No authority had been removed from him, and no ruling had been overturned. He had simply allowed the foundation beneath his succession to be examined. Rowan entered Mara's authenticated verification copy into the official record. Our first question is narrow. What evidence accompanied the original petition, and does any verifiable portion still survive? Adrian opened 3 restricted archive ledgers. The transfer reference appears here, but there is an additional attachment code absent from the general index. Alara leaned forward. What does it identify? Rowan studied the notation. Supporting material transferred under separate succession classification. The senior councilman looked toward him. Do we know where it went? Not yet. Alara felt the familiar weight of those words. Missing records had shaped too much of her life. She touched the guardian seal at her collar. Can I request the restricted classification index? Yes, Rowan said. Then I request it. Across the chamber, Cale gave the smallest nod. Adrian returned from the archive with a protected index and placed it before Rowan. The old attachment code mapped to an obsolete storage designation beneath the succession chamber, a section excluded from the modern searchable catalog when the archive system had been reorganized. Rowan traced the reference carefully. That explains why ordinary searches never found it. Adrian looked toward the archive doors. The location still exists. The court remained in session while he and 2 archive clerks followed the designation. When they returned, Adrian carried a narrow gray case, sealed inside a protective cover. Rowan examined the custody markings before opening it. Several preserved copies rested inside, with one folded declaration. These materials have not yet been individually authenticated, he warned. Nothing in this case becomes established fact merely because it was stored with the petition. Alara nodded. Then read only what the record presently supports. Rowan unfolded the first transfer sheet. Genealogical testimony, inheritance records, and a certified declaration concerning a disputed succession branch. A murmur passed through the chamber. Cale remained still. Does the transfer sheet identify the branch? Rowan read farther, then stopped. Alara saw the change in his expression. Rowan. He looked first at her, then toward Cale. It confirms one thing. The disputed branch was not filed under Lady Alara's family. Relief came with confusion so quickly that Alara could not separate them. Then whose family? The identifying name remains protected under the older classification. Rowan turned the page. The visible portion establishes only that the disputed branch was connected to the royal line preceding the ruling 19 years ago. Cale stepped away from the throne. Nothing more. Nothing I can responsibly state before authentication. Alara was grateful for the restraint. They had spent too long suffering from conclusions built on incomplete records to create another one now. Rowan examined the remaining notation. His expression tightened again. There is another verified reference we can establish without opening the protected identity. What is it? Alara asked. Dr. Hart requested independent authentication of this attachment 3 days before your records were removed from Blackstone's searchable archive. Silence settled over the chamber. Alara looked down at the guardian seal. For years, she had believed her erased history was the mystery. Now it seemed increasingly possible that her disappearance had been part of something larger, a way of making the independent review itself harder to complete. Cale looked toward the unopened declaration. What is required to reveal the protected name? Rowan checked the original classification provision before answering. First, the attachment must be formally authenticated against its surviving custody references. After that, because the material belongs to the unresolved covenant petition, authorization rests with the guardian. Every face in the chamber turned toward Alara. She looked across the 20 feet, separating her from Cale. That morning, he had chosen to open a truth that might threaten everything he held. Now the next part of that truth had reached her hands. She did not ask whether the name behind the seal would protect his throne. She did not ask whether it would protect her past. She asked only the question her office required. How long will authentication take? Rowan looked at the sealed declaration. If the custody references hold, we can know by tomorrow. Alara touched the silver seal at her collar, then authenticated. Cale held her gaze across the chamber. Neither of them knew whose name waited behind that protection or what it would change when spoken aloud. But for the first time in 19 years, the truth was no longer waiting for someone powerful enough to hide it. It was waiting for two people willing to hear it.